Welcome to this presentation about Mystica workflows. So today we're going to talk about automation. So automation is key these days in mostly any production, really. The need of removing unnecessary, necessary but complex and repetitive tasks is key for getting, really complex pipelines to, improve the results of what we get in those kind of productions. So basically what we're going to show in here is a software that allows us to automate any kind of process in a really simple way. Normally automation is linked with, complex softwares, very expensive ones. So we try at PTO to remove that in order to create a really simple software that allows us to automate all those tasks. So before I jump into the VFX pipeline, I will build a really simple workflow, an example of what we can do in Mystica workflow, just to understand the concept behind it. So I will start from the scratch here by creating a new workflow. So here in the center, we have a big canvas. This is a node graph, and I will build my pipeline, the pipeline that I want to automate using nodes. Those nodes are in here, in the left, in this left panel. So those are classified on inputs, tasks, and outputs. So as you can see in the inputs, and we can just highlight some of them, we already integrate with many external platforms like Aspera, AWS, Dropbox, Signian, Frame.io. For communication, we have Slack, WhatsApp, etc., etc. So Mystica Workflows is a software that you can combine with other tools if you need it. So what I'm going to do in here is just to add a watch folder as an input, which is this one. This will work as an input and as a trigger node for my workflow. And from here, I'm going to add some transcoding nodes, like, for example, EXR. And then another node, which is going to be like a progress node here, right? We use official Apple Progress on Windows, Mac, and Linux, which is great. And then let's say after this render, we want to send those files through Aspera, right? And then maybe those progress files to Frame.io for review. Okay. So communication is important here. So once those files have been uploaded to those platforms, let's say that we want to send an email. And we can set the order like this. So Aspera first, the email second. And then for the Frame.io, let's say that we want to communicate with our team by using Slack, right? So those are external platforms, again, that are already supported in Mystica workflows. Okay, so these are really simple workflows, but they illustrate the concept really well. Everything is very visual. It's easy to track. It's easy to follow. And one of the key aspects is not only how easy it is to build those workflows, is removing human mistakes. So as you can see, some of those, all of those nodes, on top of them, they have a color dot in here. If it's on green, that means that the node is ready to be used, it's ready to run because it has some predefined parameters that works out of the box. But if the node doesn't have those parameters there, it will be in orange, which means that the node needs some kind of configuration, right? In order to know what is missing here, we can just go to the validation inspector, select the node, and you see we have here the information about that node, what is missing there in order to use in our render queue here. Oops, I close it. 1 second. Open it again, and okay. There you go. We'll move it here. Sorry about that. All right. So basically, we can just check what is missing in every single workflow before even running it. When the workflow is running, we have here the render log, which basically gives me all the information of what is happening in every single step of the workflow. This render log is written as well in a text file, so we can access to that information at any moment in case that we need to check what happened previously in that workflow. Okay, so with this idea in mind, we are going to open a more complex scenario, which is our automated VFX pools. I'm going to drag and drop the workflow here and just open it there. Okay, so this automated pipeline is built with multiple workflows. So basically, those workflows are connected between each other. We have here 3 workflows. We're going to talk about these 3. And the first workflow, basically, with the output of the first workflow, we basically create the input of the next workflows, right? All right, so this first workflow is the one that basically creates the content for the compositor. The EDL, the EXR sequences, the CDLs, etc. Right? We'll take a look to one of those EDLs just to see the format that we're using. This EDL comes from Media Composer. It's pretty standard. We have here the tape name. We have in the green locator the VFX name. And of course, we have the CDL information. So we're going to use that info to automate the whole pipeline. So this workflow has 2 inputs. The first one is a watch folder. that is limited to EDLs, right? The second one is our storage, where I have my media. Then we have several tasks. The first one is extracting the CDL information contained in the EDL, and just to create the CDL files in the location that we set in here. In order to name those CDLs correctly, we go to the naming matching rules, and we're going to get the name from the green locator, which is the one that we have in here. As you can see, the VFX name, right? In case that the editor put in the same locator more stuff, like for example, review comments, something like that, we can always filter that locator using this kind of name convention, trying to find the VFX name in that locator, right? The second task is an EDL creation task. So basically, based on the original EDL, we're going to create a new EDL with the VFX shots. We are replacing the tape name, and we are replacing it with the VFX name because we want to conform with the files that we are going to create in this workflow, with the EXR sequences that we're going to create in this workflow. If the previous EDL, the original one, had more markers or, more locators, we can just move those locators into this new EDL. And we can select the format in here. If we're working with results, for example, as a finishing solution, we can just enable the result format. If we're using with Baselite or Mystica, we can use the Mystica format, which is probably the most standard format. But anyway, you can use both formats here. The most important part of the workflow is the conform filter. This is the one that takes the information, the in and out timecode here, plus the tape name. And connected with our storage, it will search for those files, and it will basically conform those files, adding some handles. So it will create a list of clips already trimmed with information of the EDL plus some handles. With that list of clips, we can just go to our export or our output nodes. In this particular case, we have an EXR that you can see here. And in order to name those EXRs automatically, we have here the green locator token, dynamic token. So, but basically what we're doing is take the information from the green locator of my EDL and use that for the name of my EXR sequences. This is part basically of a full library of dynamic tokens that we have in here that we can basically use with the internal EDL, metadata of the files, or metadata that comes from other external sources, like for example, an EDL, a database, a CSV file, or whatever, right? If we take a look to the EXR rendering node, we have the traditional settings like the codec. We can change the resolution, the frame rate we want, or define, for example, the first frame number to 1001, which is pretty standard in the industry. We can export the metadata, the input metadata as a sidecar file, like in CSV, which is the CSV that Resolve uses, or XMP, or even make color space transformation. We are working with EXR, so it's pretty common to go to ACES linear. We support ACES 1.3, which is the latest version of ACES in Mystica workflows. We are going to export as well a reference file for the compositor here. Now, the key aspect for the reference file is that we need to apply the CDL information on those files. So we need to apply the CDL that is contained on the EDL in here, right? So in order to apply it, we are going to build our color pipeline. So first we go from our input color space to our working color space, which is AP1 ACCCT. We're working in an ACES pipeline all the time for this particular presentation. Then we apply the CDL grade. The source is set on auto, because it comes from the EDL of the conform. But if we have the CDL information as an independent files that have been already created, we can just bring them from sidecar files, and you can just select them from there. Then finally, we'll have the ACES ODT to go to Rec 709 and finally make the rendering progress using, again, the information of the green locator, which is the VFX name that we want to use for our reference site as well. In this particular case, we're changing the resolution to HD just to have a lightweight file, of course. All right, so this is again the workflow that creates the content for the compositor. Now we are going to use this output to update our database. In this particular case, as an example, we're using ShotGrid. Okay, so the input of this workflow is basically the reference folder. We are going to use that one as a reference for my database. So we have a folder here, and every single node in Mystica Workflows has a name convention field. This name convention field, in this name convention field, you can define the name convention of the shots of your project. If we take a look to the VFX name in our EDL, well, this, of course, follows a name convention. So this is the project, episode number, sequence, shot, and process. The last part in the name is the process. For example, this is the layer, this is the background. It gives an extra information to the compositor. So this is a very nice addition. All right, so we define that same name convention here. And we're going to use that name convention for basically updating our database in ShotGrid. We transform that name convention into metadata, and once it's a metadata, we can use it for whatever we want. So the first node, ShotGrid node, will create the project in our database. If the project is already created, it won't duplicate the project. It will go to the next step, which is basically creating the sequence. And in order to create the sequence, we're using those dynamic tokens that we defined at the beginning. So we're creating those sequences or those objects in our database automatically and dynamically based on the input. Next step, create the shots inside that sequence. Again, using those dynamic tokens to basically create those things, those objects automatically in our database. And finally, the different versions inside that shot. We don't upload anything until the last step. So in the last step, we have an upload option, and we can upload those reference files as an attachment or as a thumbnail, depending if we want to upload something or not to our database, right? Now, the next step is how can we organize our footage in our local storage. So this is probably the most complex example in this pipeline, but it's really powerful and illustrates a really nice capability of Mystical Workflows, which is the classifier. Okay, so here is the same thing. We use the output of the first workflow as an input for this one. In this workflow here, we go to the name convention of our input, and we basically define base name and process. So we're going to focus basically in the last part of the name of my shots, right? We transform this name into metadata again, and then we're going to use a classifier. So the classify by metadata node is a really powerful node. We can just add it here, just as an example. This node allows us to classify or filter any input based on any metadata field. For example, we have a couple of presets here. Frame rate, right? So we can filter an input based on frame rate, and depending on the frame rate, do several tasks. Or, for example, resolution, right? Or just define a custom field, and here just define which custom field we want to use. It can be lens type, camera type, color space, anything. As long as that metadata is part of the input files, that's totally fine. Here we're going to use the last part of the name, the part that we define as process. So here, I'm going to remove this one. Here, we're going to focus on the latest part of the name, process. And if the last part of the name starts with or contains or ends with, we have several variables here with the word layer, reference, EDL markers, VFX cut, CDL, whatever. We're going to do several tasks with those outputs. So we assign a new name convention on the fly, again, defining the project, the episode number, the sequence, whatever. And then we move those files to different locations that are built using those dynamic tokens. So in that way, I can take hundreds of files and reorganize them based on the name, right? So this is just an example of what Mystical Workflows can do. We started with just here a simple watch folder and just a folder with my local storage, with my media, and I can connect multiple workflows between each other to automate the whole pipeline. Now, the beauty of Mystical Workflows is that it's fully Python scriptable. So I can add my own functionalities here if I need it. We have here a Python node, right, where you can add your own scripts if you want. You can call external applications and connect multiple applications between each other. So you don't even need to use Mystical Workflows for rendering or processing. You can just connect multiple apps to basically build your pipeline and automate your pipeline. In case that you want to basically use one of our functionalities and modify it, if we go to one of those functions, for example, this one, the one that extracts the CDL information from the EDL, we can go to the Python area, and we are not hiding the code. You can take it, you can modify it, and you can add your own functionality based on this node. The whole interface can be even manipulated by Python. So you can even customize it to your needs and make it look as, as other applications if you want. So that's totally fine. Part of the integration with Mystical Workflows is that it integrates really well with Deadline. It integrates already with Deadline. So we can send entire workflows to Deadline. So, for example, here in the render queue, I have this small button. This means if it's enabled, this means that all the workflows will be sent to Deadline. So if we have like different render nodes, you can speed up the process by, dividing the process between different render nodes. If in case you want to send only specific tasks, you can just go to one of those nodes in here and just do the same thing. So in this particular case, we're only sending the EXR sequence to the render node instead of sending the whole workflow. Now, sending, for example, sequences to a render farm is quite simple because you just send one frame to one render node, and that's fine. And then you will process different frames in parallel. Normally, it's a bit more tricky with movies because a movie is only one file. So we have developed as well a couple of nodes in here. One is called Split Movie. which basically allows me to split the movies in blocks of certain amount of frames. And then finally, we have a join movie to basically join those movies again in one piece. So you can send lots of frames to different render nodes to speed up the process and then combine those pieces together again in just one single movie if you want, right? So this is just an example of what you can do with Mystica workflows. It's not only focused on, of course, on VFX pipelines. We have customers using it for localization. We have customers using it for VOD deliveries. You can basically automate anything. It integrates already, for example, with results, so you can send things from results timeline directly to Mystica workflow without any intermediate render if you want. So it's extremely flexible, and it allows you to, optimize and automate any part of your pipeline, especially those complex and repetitive tasks. In case of you don't find, for example, a functionality that you want in here, or you need something specific for your company, we're always offering like custom development services, which is great, right? Okay, so with this final part is finished my presentation. We're over there in a demo pod over there. If you have any questions, if you want to see more examples, because we have example for mostly anything really. And yeah, I hope you like this presentation. Again, we are there if you need any answer or if you make any questions. Thank you very much. Thanks.